a major flip and reclassification for one of the top players in 2025, defensive lineman Armondo Blount. How did it happen, and how does he now fit into the 24 class rankings-wise? We're bringing in all our experts to break down this unique situation. Elsewhere in the Sunshine State, though, the Gators grabbed a 5-star. LJ McCray makes his commitment, and we make sure you know exactly what it means for Florida's top 5 class. Plus, we'll tell you what our recruiting team is up to this time of year, why putting in some miles to watch players in person makes all the difference. And Mizzou has a shot to land its second 5-star of the cycle on Wednesday as the Tigers are finalists for wide receiver Ryan Wingo. What is up with them lately? All that and more as the college football recruiting show starts right now. Alongside Blair Angulo, I am Emily Proud. A reminder to submit your questions in the chat. The only way that happens is by subscribing to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Also, please like this video so we know that you're watching. You go ahead, you hit that like button. We're going to hit the headlines because another 5-star is off the board. The number 6 player in the class, defensive lineman LJ McCray, committing to Florida over the weekend. You watch the big announcement go down right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, aka Commit HQ. Blair, how big a get is this for Billy Napier?
It's the highest rated commitment in the Billy Napier era. You build a premier SEC program by winning in the trenches, and LJ McCray is a premier talent. That's now 3 5-stars for the Gators in the 2024 recruiting class.
How about that? Steve Wiltfong joins us in minutes with more on LJ McCray. But first, we got another commitment over the weekend. 4-star corner Isaiah Rubin out of Los Alamitos, California, picking USC. Rubin told our national recruiting analyst Greg Biggins that it's always been his dream to suit up for the Trojans. So who did Lincoln Riley just add to his top 20 class?
A really good defensive back prospect with premier ball skills. He can play corner, he can play nickel, and as we know, USC could use all the defensive prospects that it can get. So a nice recruiting win for Lincoln Riley off the field this past weekend.
Well, certainly. Well, 2025's number 6 quarterback, he's officially spoken for. Antoine Hill Jr. has committed to Colorado. He is the 71st overall player, and his dad told 24/7 Sports that Dion and the Buffs, well, they made his son feel like home. Blair, what kind of quarterback does Prime now have to work with?
A potential program changer, just like Shedeur Sanders has been for CU this fall. Get this, Emily. Unless Dion is able to pull off a crazy quarterback flip this cycle, Hill would be the first 4-star quarterback to sign with the Buffaloes since Sefo Liufau was the marquee recruiting victory in the 2013 recruiting class.
That is 10 years ago. What a win for that program. Well, meanwhile, a major Florida flip, defensive lineman Armondo Blount flipping his commitment from Miami to Florida State. But wait, there's more. He then announced his reclassification to the 2024 class. So with it, he is now the number 39 player in this current cycle. Now, we're about to break down the story extensively. But Blair, just how fun have these battles between the Canes and the Noles on the trail been to follow?
It's everything we could have hoped for. These head-to-head battles and eventual flips have been so fascinating. We knew Mike Norvell and his staff would not just stand around when Mario Cristobal came back to the state, and they have delivered. This is what makes recruiting so fun to follow.
This is kind of a tricky story to follow, though, because you might be thinking, hey, didn't we just do a rankings update? So what happens when a player becomes a late addition to the class? Well, we had some of those same questions, so we are bringing in our director of scouting, Andrew Ivins, to help us make sense of all of it. So, Andrew, how do you go about slotting in Armondo Blount into this 2024 group after his reclassification?
Well, reclassifications for football, I mean, it's not like college basketball. You follow college basketball recruiting, you have kids jumping all the time in between classes. In college football, it's been pretty rare, but I don't think it's going away. We've seen more and more of it here recently. With Armondo Blount, you know, this is a guy we like, right? And obviously we had him ranked super high in the 2025 cycle, but when you try to slot him in with these 2024 rankings, this is where we see him at number 39, number 9 defensive lineman. Now, I'll caution this and say, hey, our rankings are not finalized for the 2024 cycle. We still have 2 more updates. Armondo Blount was a guy that was committed to play in the 2025 Under Armour All-America game. I would assume we're going to get him here in the 2024 Under Armour All-America game before he makes his way to Tallahassee. But it's this reclassification. We're kind of learning about it. And about 24 guys have done it so far over the years, dating all the way back to John David Booty in the 2023 cycle. It's normally been a lot of quarterbacks, but there have been some defensive linemen, some skill players. And the biggest takeaway is you're going to need a developmental year or 2, which isn't surprising. I mean, these guys are, moving up a year. They're no longer the biggest kid. They're no longer the fastest kid, and they're kind of resetting their clock. So that's where we see Armondo Blount right now, just kind of compared to some of these other defensive linemen. We still like his upside. Number 39 overall for us would essentially be a round 2 grade. We're going to see how he finishes out this season. And then again, maybe hopefully we'll get him in that Under Armour All-America game.
Andrew, you've mentioned in the past how important a junior film is in the evaluation of a player, and in particular with Armondo Blount in this case. How difficult or what are the challenges now as we evaluate his junior film as his senior film?
Well, I think, we see, and what's unique about Armondo Blount is he's actually a kid that played some varsity football as an 8th grader at Fort Lauderdale Dillard High School. So he's got a few more years than usual under his belt. But oftentimes what we see with these prospects as juniors and seniors, they take major steps forward from a developmental standpoint. They're playing with more confidence. So it's a little bit difficult. Now, we do have some data points on Armondo Blount. We know he's elite in the lower half. You guys were watching those clips earlier. He's explosive. This is a kid that's won a state title, an AAU national title in the shot put. He's 4'5" on the short shuttle. He's got a 30-inch vertical jump. So we've seen some of it, and we've seen some of it this fall at Miami Central as he has transferred in to there. It's not ideal. Having talked with a number of college staffers around the country over the past few weeks, I've been kind of working on a story about this reclassification. I mean, you want to get as much exposure and as much data you can get with a prospect. With Armondo Blount removing that senior season, it kind of muddies up the evaluation a little bit more. But we still think he's a good prospect, and we'll see, what he does when he's able to get to Tallahassee.
Yeah, I'm sure that heats things up for you guys, too. The scouting team and his evaluation. Florida State fans are just excited to get him a year earlier. But from your standpoint, you're trying to gather all of that film. So I like what you said. This is not a finished product with any of these rankings. So looking forward to seeing what happens with him the rest of this cycle. Andrew, thank you for breaking that down for us. You mentioned your story. You can read that on 247sports.com, all about these reclassifications. Also, these two, Andrew and Coop, are going to discuss this kind of interesting situation in depth on the 247 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. That's tomorrow, so make sure to check it out. Okay, then there is the matter of his big-time flip. So for that, we're bringing in our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, and this is exactly what I keep saying. It's a tricky situation. There's a lot of strings to pull at. So Steve, I mean, what a win for Florida State to get Blount to flip his commitment from Miami. How did this all go down?
Well, Florida State's the program that led for him much of his process. In fact, he took that visit to Miami for the Hurricanes win over Texas A&M and kind of surprisingly jumped in the fold for the Hurricanes. I know he's a Miami kid, and Mario Cristobal and his staff do a great job, but I think he just got caught up in that moment and that energy and that excitement. Obviously, he liked Miami, but Florida State is the program that was on him early, got him to campus a bunch, was the program that he's loved for the majority of his process. And now they have him in the fold. Another monster recruiting win for Mike Norvell and his coaching staff. They beat Georgia and Ohio State, among others, for KJ Bolden. They hold off Penn State for Luke Krummenhoek. Now they beat Miami for Armondo Blount. They flipped Landon Thomas from Georgia. So this is a staff in Tallahassee that's showing that they have the recruiting chops to go toe-to-toe with any program in the country, any head coach in the country, and get their fair share of wins as they're trying to maintain a program now that's in the national title hunt.
Yeah, Blount is just the beginning. I mean, while we're on the discussion of Florida State, they also landed 2025, for now, 3-star safety Ethan Pritchard. We can never tell. But over the weekend, they're currently in play for maybe some other targets. So who should we be tracking right now for the
Yeah, they had a lot of blue chip prospects on campus in 2025 and 2026 as they try and get ahead for some of these prime time blue chippers moving forward. Three guys to highlight for you. You got Eastman, Georgia, Dodge County top 247 athlete Daryl Johnson, who told me Tallahassee's a vibe that nowhere else gives him. I think early in his process, Florida State is a program to definitely watch for him. Then you have top 247 safety Hilton Stubbs out of Jacksonville Mandarin, who just was very impressed with the way the defense was flying around, the way they play their young guys. Florida State's very high on his list early in the process. He's one of the most sought-after defensive backs in America. And then you have top 247 cornerback Onis Konanbanny out of Columbia, South Carolina. I think Florida State might lead for him early on. He said, who wouldn't want to play for Coach Pat Surtain? He said he thinks Coach Surtain is the best technical coach in the country at the position. But there were a lot of guys that are very excited about Florida State. It was another night game inside Doak. That atmosphere delivered. The second half where they absolutely suffocated Duke, pitched a shutout. Couldn't have done it in front of a better group of prospects. They've already landed a couple commits, and I think down the road they'll land a few more of these guys.
Steve, let's stay in the Sunshine State, and we mentioned it at the top of the show. 5-star defensive lineman LJ McCray committing to the Florida Gators. They were able to beat out Auburn, Florida State, Miami, and Georgia. So how were they able to land this incredible in-state talent?
Well, I think consistency. Coach Napier and his staff did a fantastic job of prioritizing LJ when they got to Gainesville. I'm not sure there was a program that recruited him harder. Now, he's been visiting Florida since middle school. When he was on campus for a camp, and he told his dad in 8th grade that he wanted to be a Division I football player, thought he could do it, said that on the Florida campus, and now here he is. He's going to get to play his games inside the swamp. I think there were other programs that gave him a lot to think about at various points, from Georgia to Florida State. He had great relationships at Auburn. In Miami was swinging, but I think the relationships and consistency with Florida, but he also took his decision into his senior year for a reason. He wanted to see his finalists play some games. He went to the Florida-Tennessee game and saw the trajectory of the program starting to come together under Coach Napier and the second-year staff. He said that was a game where hardly anybody was picking Florida to win. Not only did they win, they dominated the balls. It was an awesome night inside the swamp, and I think that really helped ensure him that Florida was a program that was going in the right direction. He loves the recruiting class. It's the number 3 class in the country, and LJ McCray is one of the most pivotal recruiting wins any program has had in this 2024 cycle, alongside DJ Lagway. Florida needed to hit big at quarterback this cycle. They get a potential franchise guy in 5-star DJ Lagway. They need to reshape this defense that's playing well this year, but they want more plays behind the line of scrimmage. This front 7 group that they have recruited is the best group in America as well. The Florida football arrow up on the way they're recruiting here in 2024. LJ McCray, what a major recruiting win.
DJ and LJ, it makes a lot of sense. Promotional sense, too. I feel like you could have fun with that. LJ McCray, also one of our biggest risers in the latest rankings update. And speaking of risers, you mentioned it, Gators now up to number 3 in the team rankings. But Steve, I doubt they're done. So what's left on the board for Florida?
Well, they want more guys that can help them win a national championship. That's the standard in Gainesville. That's why Billy Napier took this job, and they are getting after it on the trail. There's a few more top targets for them. Xavier Bam Mincy is certainly one of the most coveted guys still on their board, LJ McCray's teammate. Now, Alabama's a program to watch there when you talk to the head football coach over there at Mainland, Coach Rowland. But Florida's been a mainstay in the recruitment there. Michael Burrow is a guy that they had in the fold at one point. He decommitted. It looked like he was a trend towards Georgia when that happened. But he's been back to Gainesville. He's expected to be at the Florida-Georgia game this weekend. So maybe that's one that goes back in Florida's favor as they try and recruit more massive defensive linemen. They're obviously trying to flip some big timers too. Emily and Blair, none bigger than the number 1 player in the country per 24/7 Sports, Jeremiah Smith. I think that's going to be tough sledding. Smith was back in Columbus this weekend. Another guy they're trying to flip is Jameer Grimsley, an Alabama commit, defensive back. He was back in Tuscaloosa this past weekend for that win over Tennessee. But Florida, they've been trying to flip him since the day he committed to Alabama as well. So they're in on some elite guys moving forward, probably some other ones out there. So you're going to want to stay tuned the Swamp 247 from now until that third Wednesday in December.
Steve, we are very, very, very close to Spatula season. We all celebrate it. You love it. And another player that is on Spatula Watch, or could be on Spatula Watch, is Ellis Robinson, the number 3 overall player in the 2024 class and the number 1 defensive prospect in the class. He just visited Miami over the weekend. What's the latest you're hearing on that situation?
Well, he's been to Miami a few times since he committed to Georgia back in February on the 24/7 Sports Signing Day show. And I haven't heard anything to make me think that I have to get my spatula out here yet for Ellis Robinson. Look, he likes Miami. It was an opportunity for him to get to Coral Gables with some of his IMG Academy teammates that are super high on Miami that had some good visits, like Owusu Boateng, our number 3 linebacker in the country, had a good visit there in the 2025 class. But Ellis Robinson, he's been up front with Georgia. Georgia knew that visit was happening. He gets back to Athens whenever he can. The relationship with Fran Brown, Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, and those guys, that's going to be as tough a flip as it's going to be for anyone to flip Jeremiah Smith.
All right, as we get ready for spatula season, you did some sort of gesture. Steve, I'm going to ask you to do another one, and that's to remind the people to hit that like button. That's what it looks like. Double thumbs up, Steve. We appreciate it. Yeah, not a lot of people have hit that like button. I would appreciate getting that number up just a little bit. Okay, the Tide with a huge win over rival Tennessee on Saturday. And just as that smoke cleared from the victory cigars, you put in a crystal ball for them to land 4-star athlete Daniel Hill. So what has you leaning that way after his visit?
The Cigar Bowl, nothing like the Cigar Bowl in the 3rd Saturday in October. Meridian High top 247 running back Daniel Hill. He's been to 3 Alabama games this year. He's been to Tuscaloosa as much as any prospect that's been recruited by Alabama has probably visited. And he said that he has never heard Bryant-Denny Stadium as loud as he heard it on Saturday. So he loved that atmosphere, loved the way the offense made some adjustments. The track record at the position, just the proximity to home. His family loves it. And then I asked him afterwards if Alabama has emerged over Tennessee and South Carolina in this recruitment. And he was like, you can say a little bit. So there's still time for the Vols in South Carolina here to battle. But that's a current pulse pick. I think Alabama is the one to beat for Daniel Hill. We'll see if they can continue to hold off the Gamecocks and Vols as they try and add one of the most coveted running backs in the country. A young man that at 6'1", 225 pounds, can also be a big-time playmaker catching the football. Jahmyr Gibbs missed that element he brought to Alabama, something Daniel Hill could bring down the road.
And Daniel Hill wasn't the only prospect that made it down to Tuscaloosa this weekend. Steve, who were some other names that you were able to get a hold of that loved the environment down there in Alabama?
Well, you talk about spatula season, that starts with top 247 defensive lineman William Eccles out of Houston High there in Mississippi. He's committed to Ole Miss right now, but he loved the fans. He loved the way the defense pitched a shutout in the second half. He wants to get back for an official visit, but said the staff treating him with great hospitality and everything. So Alabama is certainly giving William Eccles a lot to think about. We already talked about Xavier Mincy. They're battling Florida, among others, for him. But then in the 2025 class, you got Zion Grady, the number 2 edge in the top 247 in that junior class. I logged the 24/7 Sports Crystal Ball last week in favor of Alabama. A decision coming November 12th for the Charles Henderson High stand out there in Troy, Alabama. Always talks about the first-class facilities, first-class coaching staff, how they've developed outside linebackers and edge players. And then he just said it was crazy being there in Tuscaloosa. And then 2026, man, Alabama's got a great shot at a lot of these young sophomores that were there, from quarterback Jared Curtis, who's been a regular on campus. He's as coveted a passer as there is in America right now. He likes Georgia. He likes South Carolina. He likes Florida State. But Alabama just continues to impress him. And Coach Reese, getting to spend time with him was a highlight of his visit. The number 1 or the number 2 offensive tackle in the top 247, Jackson Cantwell out of Nixa, Missouri. He's been making the rounds this fall to some of the biggest games in America, and he just loved that atmosphere in Tuscaloosa. Prior to the season, he mentioned Alabama as one of his early favorites, so nothing changed there. He's really clicked with Coach Wolford. You have the number 1 edge rusher in the top 247, Hezekiah Harris from in-state, who loves Alabama. They're going to be a major contender for him as well.
Let's head out west. Oregon hosting 5-star offensive tackle Jordan Seaton. The IMG product he's been pretty busy as the only uncommitted 5-star tackle. I'm pretty sure he took a visit to Alabama, the aforementioned team. But what did you learn out of his trip to Eugene?
Well, coming into the trip, Alabama was considered the favorite, with Florida and Tennessee giving him a lot to think about. Coming out of this Oregon unofficial, so it's his second unofficial, took one back in the summer. The Ducks are in fantastic position. Oregon had a big offensive performance, including over 250 yards rushing. Both running backs hit the century mark. He said, who wouldn't want to play in that scheme and get out and pull and block and let the running backs do their thing? He loves Coach Lanning. He loves the environment at Oregon. I think that they're in the middle of this. He said as much. So Oregon, as they try and work on a second straight top 10 class under Dan Lanning and company, they have a great chance to land Jordan Seaton, who's got a future visit locked in for Ohio State for the Michigan State game. Again, Alabama, Florida, and Tennessee right there. Colorado and Miami, a couple other contenders. But Oregon, the arrow is up in the recruitment of Jordan Seaton. And it's also up in the recruitment of top 247 edge Solomon Williams, who did take an official visit this weekend. He's going to go to the Alabama-LSU game, make his decision. Solomon Williams said Oregon's in his top 2 guys. Texas A&M also battling for that coveted pass rusher.
From Eugene to Columbus, let's stay in Big Ten country, Steve, and talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes after their big win against Penn State. They did it in front of several top recruits, including a couple that you have crystal ball predictions in, linebacker Eli Lee and offensive lineman Carter Lowe in the 2025 class. What's the buzz on the Buckeyes after a big weekend against Penn State?
Well, you guys keep bringing up spatulas in this segment, and I think if you look at top 247 defensive lineman Amaris Williams, who's a top 50 prospect in America in the 24/7 Sports Player Rankings, number 1 player in North Carolina, he's committed to Florida. But Ohio State got him in for an official visit this weekend, and talking to his mother, talking to people that spent time with Amaris, he absolutely loved the experience. Larry Johnson blew him and his family away, specifically because of his track record of putting guys in the NFL. But then those guys that are in the NFL come back to Columbus to spend time with Larry Johnson in the off season. So developer of men, they love the atmosphere. I think that we'll see where this visit high goes. But I think that they have given this Florida commit a lot to think about as they try and add to a recruiting class that ranks number 2 nationally. Ohio State's going to land a bunch of these juniors and sophomores that visited. None a bigger priority than Devin Sanchez, the 5-star cornerback from Houston, Texas, who's made multiple visits to the Buckeyes campus. Had a chance to talk to his dad after the visit. Bill Kurlick from Bucknuts spoke with Devin after the visit, talking to people that spent time with Devin. I think that Ohio State has set the tone in this recruitment right now as they battle Alabama, Texas A&M, LSU, to name a few others that he's high on. Just the tradition of Ohio State, the big game feel, the relationship with Coach Perry Eliano, Coach Walton, and Coach Day. Ohio State, getting him back to campus, they've set the tone for Devin Sanchez, one of the most coveted players at the position in America.
Spatula season, I'm bringing it up once again, Steve. I know you're bracing yourself for it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, the early signing period is just 8 short weeks away, and trust me, you won't want to miss any upcoming editions of the Wiltfong Whip Around as we race towards National Signing Day. The buzz, the rumors, the flips, you can catch them all right here by subscribing to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel.
I told you on Thursday's show that Blair was off on scouting duty in Arizona, so we thought it might be a fun discussion to tell you what exactly that means and what our regional recruiting analysts do this time of year. So we are bringing in our East Coast guru, Brian Dohn, and our West Coast guru, Blair, to break down the importance of these in-person evaluations. Now, you both attend multiple games per weekend, not just for fun, but you go to practices, you scout these players. Brian, why is it so important to see these prospects in this kind of setting as opposed to maybe a camp or some other sort of workout?
Yeah, because they don't play football with shorts and a T-shirt. I mean, that's the best answer I can give short term. But, yeah, you want to see how they react to the physical aspect. You want to see just in terms of their movement within a game. And to me, a big thing is, do they compete play in and play out? Especially, I went to go watch a receiver, Texas A&M commit Jalen Hornsby. I want to see, when the ball's not coming his way, does he just sit there and do nothing? Does he try to block? What's his energy level like? And also, in games, you want to see game on the line. If it's a skill position guy, does that coach have faith in that player to make a play, or are they going elsewhere with it? So there's a lot of, we love the measurables of the camp. We love watching them move, their athleticism. But for me, until you see him in pads and with the lights on and all that stuff where the results actually matter, to me, that's the best situation to go see these kids in.
That's a terrific point, Brian. I think also the other thing that stands out to me about the in-person evaluation is that you don't ever see bad plays on highlight films. And you want to see some bad plays. You want to see how maybe they react to a drop pass or to a sack or to a missed assignment. I think that's all part of the evaluation process to see how they might be able to handle failure at the next level and beyond. You also like to see how they go through warm-ups. That's one of my favorite parts about the in-person eval, is going out there early, seeing who's on the field early and how they go about their work to get prepared for that big Friday night game. I think it's impossible to get a full scope of a player and what he might be able to accomplish at the next level and in the NFL if you're never able to see them in person. So that in-person eval is huge for our process.
Yeah, it's all the things that you don't see, you're actually able to see because, the highlight reels are really fun to watch, and we'll roll them on this show all day long. But ultimately, you need to get a better picture of who this player is from the full scope. Blair, this past weekend, you watched the #1 player in the state of Arizona from the 2025 class in 4-star wide receiver Cooper Perry. So what did you see from him in person that maybe wasn't evident on film?
Well, Emily, where's number 10? His first name is Cooper, so automatically you might think this could be the next Cooper Kupp, and he checks off all those boxes. He's a really savvy route runner. You see it there, working his way back towards the football. He had 3 touchdowns, 195 yards receiving. He had an end around right there where he scores. He's got really good anticipation where he's able to know where the ball's going to go. He's able to feel out pressure and kind of see where the defenders are going to be and feel out those soft spots in coverage. A really savvy route runner, maybe not the best athlete out west in terms of sheer speed or sheer athleticism or mobility, but I think he makes up for it with everything else that he brings to the table. He's also an All-American lacrosse player. He's got nearly 20 scholarship offers. Ole Miss is the latest one. I know he wants to go check out the Rebels. He's a terrific player and certainly living up to that bill as the #1 player in the state of Arizona.
That's what we mean by highlight tape. A lot of highlights from him over the weekend. Meanwhile, out east, Brian, you attended the Low Township game at Cedar Creek in New Jersey, and apparently the weather was not quite as nice as it was in Arizona. So how do conditions maybe factor into your evaluation of players?
Yeah, I remember during the pandemic when there were no live sports and you'd be flipping through the channels and it'd be mud bog racing. Play football in that. Yeah. I mean, it was absolutely atrocious conditions to where, one of the kids I wanted to see is a 2025 athlete, Cameron Miller at Winslow, and he did really well, had a nice catch on a play to the sideline. But he also fielded a punt where he went to make a cut and fell flat on his face. There were times he would go out to make a block and kind of be on skis a little bit trying to block the defender. He played corner, and one of the things I liked about him with corner was he was still able to keep his balance, get some cuts in and out. And what I wanted to see for him was, and also his teammate Jalen Hornsby, like I mentioned before, the A&M commit, I wanted to see what do these guys do when maybe the game's not geared toward them? And, with Cam Miller, his ability to be physical in the run game on both sides of the ball was absolutely outstanding. I loved it. And for Hornsby, look, he had one catch, and it was nice that he was able to get out on the route early in the game to the side of the field. But by the end of the game, you couldn't even do that on the sideline. And was he going to sulk and put his head down and say, I'm not going to be involved in the offense passing game? Or was he going to block? And he blocked. And, like Blair mentioned, you want to see warm-ups and everything. But the other thing is, you really get to see what these kids look like in pads. And Hornsby's a solid kid. He's got some thickness to him. He's still coming back. He missed the end of last season with a shoulder injury. I think it was a shoulder injury, I believe. And then he missed the first 4 games when he transferred schools this year. So he's starting to get back into flow. But just kind of his movements in a game, attitude in a game. And so those were the kind of things I was looking just in terms of those two players in horrific conditions, let's be honest.
Blair, what was it? Was the temperature in Arizona?
102 degrees out in Cave Creek. I drove 50 miles from the airport in Phoenix to get up into the desert, middle of nowhere, on the way up to Flagstaff. 102 degrees. You could see the lizards kind of crimbling out there in the heat.
Yikes. Okay, so it's different coast to coast. Let's go back to the warm coast where another 2025 wide receiver that you saw this weekend in Arizona was Raiden Vines Bright from Corona del Sol High School. He's also kind of vying for that top spot in the state. So what did he maybe do this weekend to help his case?
This is a player who has been checking off a lot of those boxes from an athletic standpoint. He had a 10.8 in the 100-meter dash this past spring as a sophomore. I wanted to see whether that speed would translate on the football field and whether maybe it's functional speed with him, and it certainly is. He's got all the tools that you want in a receiver. There hasn't been a number 1 rated receiver in the state of Arizona since 2016 when first-rounder N'Keal Harry was in that class, and Raiden Vines Bright will be battling with Cooper Perry, who we just talked about, for that top spot. He's a terrific route runner. He's got really good mobility and feeling out for spaces. I think the thing that stood out to me about him the most was he's actually coming back from injury, and maybe it wasn't the most competitive game from a standpoint of him getting the football, but every rep, every route, he was running at 100% speed at what he could do, and that's something that you don't see on film. You only get to see the big plays. He had 5 catches, 150 yards, that big touchdown that we saw earlier, but every other rep you're able to see the way he goes about setting up defenders, and I think the mental aptitude that he has to be able to kind of play the long game as a receiver to kind of get in that cornerback set. I was really impressed with him, and certainly a player that I think is going to be pushing for 4-star status here on 24/7 very soon.
Something that I enjoy about hearing the stories from these in-person evaluations is when you go in and you're like, okay, these are the guys that I'm going to look at, and then somebody else maybe jumps out at you that you didn't expect. So, Brian, in your case, that's 2026 wide receiver Niketon Hightower from Low Township. What caught your eye about his performance that maybe surprised you a bit?
Well, and Blair and Emily know this when you go out to the game and you just see the warm-up lines and you're like, man, who's that cat? Yeah. And so you see he's wearing number 4, he's long, he's thin, he's got some size. And you're like, okay, let me keep an eye on him. And I like kind of with guys like that, I don't want to do too much work beforehand to prep because I want to see the evaluation and before I really dig into the background of measurables and everything. And for him, he was able to get open on a bad field. He was able to catch the ball and get upfield a little bit. Defensively, playing in the defensive backfield, he was able to come up and make tackles. He seemed to be around the ball a lot. And in this game, like I had mentioned, there was a lot of mud in the middle. And so guys weren't all set always to go in there and, get dirty. I mean, because guys weren't making big runs. And he was willing to stick his nose in. He played fast. He played with speed. The size is there. He had offers from Pittsburgh, Maryland, UConn, and Penn State. So you knew about it, or at least I knew about him a little bit. But look, as we know these days, you have an offer. I don't really know how much that means sometimes early in the process. But getting to see him live and then coming back doing the research, and he's a kid that in the 100 meters as a freshman ran an 11.4. You're talking about 6 foot 170, 175. That's a really good starting point and a kid that I'm really excited to keep charting now for the next few years.
I think that moment, Brian, happens every couple times or a couple times every season. I feel like the most memorable one for me was 5 years ago. In 2018, I was in Las Vegas watching IMG Academy and Liberty out in Henderson, Nevada. And IMG Academy at the time had 5-star edge rusher Nolan Smith, who was on his way to Alabama or to Georgia, my bad. And he actually just got drafted in April in the first round by the Philadelphia Eagles. He was going to battle Troy Fautanu, the 4-star offensive tackle headed to Washington. He's now starting at left tackle for the Huskies. But the player that caught my eye was Moliki Matavao, a 4-star tight end. He ended up being a top 5 prospect at his position in that 2019 class. A terrific player with hand-eye coordination. He can high point the football. He was a good blocker, a really physical player. He actually went out and played for Oregon as a freshman, made a big touchdown catch as a true freshman inside the horseshoe. You see it here. And then this past weekend at UCLA now, making a big play against Stanford, making a touchdown grab in that game on Saturday. So that's something that happens when you go out to see some of these players, right? The Cooper Perrys or Raiden Vines. You might find the next big thing and the next big player that you're going to be scouting for the years to come.
Yeah, you find those diamonds in the rough. Thank you, Dohn, for being here to break down all the miles that you've been putting in lately. We appreciate it. You can check out more of his work online at 247sports.com. He has a story up right now that I've found particularly interesting about how Rutgers recruiting helps them gain that bowl eligibility on Saturday. It's definitely worth your time. You can read it at 247sports.com.
This Carl Reed with 24/7 Sports.
That means they don't take breaks if they 24/7.
Around the clock.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You in the class of 2024, you better stop playing around and make a decision.
And I go in there with my wife, and Mike Norvell is talking to a bunch of recruits, and he's got it pumping, he's got it going on. I leave the room with Dan Lannon, but my wife stays in the room with Mike Norvell, and I thought she was going to get in the transfer portal.
If they are going to be recruiting every day, you better be working every day, and that's the real deal.
Dr. Reed is like Nate Dogg. He knows a hit when he spit.
It's time now to read between the lines with our friend, the coach, Carl Reed. And Carl, we are gearing up for 5-star wide receiver Ryan Wingo's commitment on Wednesday. You can watch it live right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And he is from your neck of the woods in St. Louis. So tell us, what excites you most about what he can bring to whichever school he chooses?
I've been watching Ryan Wingo play football since he's a little guy, Emily, so I'm really excited. Total package, great size, great length, incredible speed. Youngest of 3 brothers, had 2 older brothers, also SEC players. One played at Missouri, one played at the University of Arkansas. Dad was also a legendary high school player in the city of St. Louis.
Still up in the air as to which school he will pick. Steve Wiltfong did tell us last week that things were kind of trending toward Mizzou landing him. So if that happens, that would mark the second 5-star in the 2024 class. The other one is the number 1 defensive lineman, Williams Nwaneri. What has gotten into Eli Drinkwitz lately with landing all of these high-profile guys?
Well, number one, he's built great relationships throughout the state. He's done a tremendous job recruiting. Missouri has a lot of momentum right now. Also, NIL in the state of Missouri, the way they've gotten behind the Missouri Tigers has done incredible things for them in recruiting. And I think that when you look at other programs, you see Mark Stoops kind of cried out to his fan base about NIL and more money and more support. The state of Missouri has totally locked in, whether from big businesses, Fortune 500 companies, or even the small business guys. Everybody is participating in NIL from a business standpoint because they've been wanting Missouri to be really good in football for a long time.
Yeah, also the way that the laws are written, too, helps with in-state talent in particular. Explain it to us. I mean, how does that encourage some of the in-state talent to stay and play at Missouri?
Well, Emily, money talks and BS runs a marathon. So it has completely changed the outcome of recruiting when you think about it. Some of the big-time players that have come out of St. Louis in the past, or Kansas City that went to Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, now they have a situation where you say, well, wait a minute, you can get your money and you can get it now if you stay home in the state of Missouri. So when you start talking finances, when you start talking about setting yourself up for generational wealth down the line, Missouri does have a neat loophole with the NIL rules where guys can start participating in NIL right away. It's a major recruiting advantage for the Tigers.
As high schoolers, right?
as high schoolers, yes.
Yeah, that is a huge advantage, and not every state has that law. That's why we've been seeing a lot of proponents of NIL try to fight for some sort of equality in it, but definitely an advantage for Missouri, taking full advantage of that. But, I mean, NIL aside, a lot of high-profile talent and elite guys have come from the state of Missouri, both past and present, guys like, I don't know, Zeke, Jamison Williams, Ronnie Perkins, and then a 5-star from last year's cycle in PJ Adebawar. So as someone who coached a lot of talent in that area, why is St. Louis and maybe Missouri just as a state an underrated hotbed for talent?
Well, every coach in the country comes through St. Louis, so I don't know whether it's underrated or not. But I think that in the past, guys did not consider Missouri. I've been in the meetings with former coaches at the University of Missouri. I've talked to high school coaches, high school prospects. A lot of those guys that you mentioned didn't even really consider Missouri. Ezekiel Elliott's parents both graduated from the University of Missouri, both athletes there. Jamison Williams, a St. Louis guy. Kyron Williams, the starting running back for the Los Angeles Rams, another St. Louis guy. And, of course, Ronnie Perkins, who I coached in high school, that's now in the Denver Broncos, went to Oklahoma. Those guys didn't really put a lot into Missouri at the time, but things have changed. Drink has done a tremendous job building relationships. He's handled recruiting very effectively and very efficiently, but also the NIL money that you get from staying in state now, it really means something to guys, and it changes the way that they look at the recruiting process now.
You know what helps too? Winning. Missouri is doing a lot of that lately right now too. Okay, so let's look into the future. Maybe who are some prospects from the state of Missouri that we need to keep our eye on?
Well, in the next class, the class of 25, the two guys up are Isaiah Mosey and Jamarion Parker. Isaiah is a wide receiver at Lee Summit North High School out in Kansas City. Jamarion Parker, running back at Cardinal Ritter High School. Those will be the two apples of that class coming out of the state of Missouri that everybody's going to go after and recruit nationally. Mosey's dad was a big-time high school player as well, went to the University of Oklahoma, so I'm sure they'll try to get involved as well. They're both national guys. Jamarion Parker is already committed to the University of Arkansas, but I'm sure that the Missouri Tigers are going to try to flip him.
Yeah, not giving up on either of those guys. So there you have it. The next big things in the state of Missouri. The current big thing in the state of Missouri is my man, Carl Reed. Thank you so much for being here and for breaking down all the great action in Missouri. It's been a fun time right now, right?
It's got to be fun for everybody in Missouri. I know that a lot of people will be in attendance in St. Louis when Ryan Wingo makes his decision, but we'll have to stay tuned to see what he decides to do.
We are calling it Wingo Wednesday. As a reminder, you can watch that go down right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. All right, it's time to check out the top 5 plays from high school football action this week, courtesy of our friends from Max Preps.
Alrighty, here we go. Your top 5 plays of the week, powered by Max Preps, Stanford High School in Connecticut. Eliza Harris. How did the DB do this? Let's rewind it, show you how it went down in Connecticut. It hits his back hip, he feels it, he grabs it. That's just your average pick, right? In the end zone. That's play number 5. Let's go to Cali, Sunnyside High School, Malachi Barnes. What a throw here by the QB. Unbelievable grab by Barnes in the back of the end zone. Snags it with one hand. He trots out the back of the end zone. Let's see it again. Play number 4. What a good-looking catch there by Malachi Barnes in Cali. From Cali to Kansas we go. C.J. Brown from Highland Park High School. Brown takes the reception, goes down the sideline, throws that guy by him, cuts it across the field, has to dodge his own player, and he's going to house call this one. We're going to rewind it, slow it down a little bit, just to show you what C.J. Brown's doing out in the state of Kansas. Get off me! Coach has to love this. That's a playmaker right there, Coach. All right, play number 2. Let's head to Texas. Austin Vivier, East Central High School, gets his punt block, but then he's a playmaker. He picks it up, and of course, he's going to take this one, dodging left and right, up across the middle of the field, all the way back into the end zone. Let's show this from a different angle for East Central High School's Austin Vivier. What a play. This could have been a great field position for the other team. Instead, it's play number 2 on Max Prep's top 5 plays of the week. Play number 1. Turn up the volume for this one.
6, Klein, the receiver on the bottom of the screen. Here's it's dropping back to Kearns. He'll look to that right side, float it looking for Klein. Leaps up, makes the catch on his feet. Klein, end zone, touchdown. 55 yards as time expires, and the Sabres walk it off.
Leighton Kearns to Braden Klein, a Minnesota miracle for Shakopee High School. They walk it off right there. That's your top play of the week on Max Preps.
A big thank you to Steve Montoya. Check out maxpreps.com for all things high school football. They have rosters, stats, intel, everything you need. You can find it all at maxpreps.com.
This guy is a blur on tape. He zigs and zags.
He's a player to potentially make an impact from day one.
It's time now for our recruit of the weekend. And why have one when you can have two five-star wide receivers? This week, it's 2024's Micah Hudson and Bryant Wesco. The two shared the field on Saturday. Wesco went for 112 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 3 receptions. It's pretty efficient. Hudson totaled 11 catches for 141 yards and 2 scores. Wesco won the war, though, as his Midlothian squad topping Hudson's Blake Belton. Blair, how impressive were those performances?
It's very difficult, I think, as a 5-star prospect to go off the way that they did, because all eyes are on you and the defense tries to hone in on trying to stop you, and they both went off with the spotlight on them. So congrats to both of them for being the recruits of the weekend.
Yeah, you know they're going to be awesome, and they were awesome. Okay, another reminder to tune in to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page Wednesday to find out where 5-star Ryan Wingo will play his college ball. So all my Georgia, Miami, Mizzou, Texas, Texas A&M, and Tennessee fans, make sure that you are locked in at 5 o'clock Eastern right here on your favorite YouTube channel. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.